Thank you, Rudy. Good morning. I'm going to make these quick. He's got votes to get to, so he's probably going to give us about 10 minutes of his time. I'm very honored to introduce our next speaker, Senator John Cornyn, a longtime friend of San Antonio and longtime friend of Texas. Born in Houston, graduated from Trinity University. Senator Cornyn has represented our state in the U.S. Senate since 2002. He's now serving his third term as our senator. He has distinguished himself as a leader in the Senate on a variety of issues, a champion for open government, bolstering the national defense, and supporting our veterans, all very important and near and dear to us in San Antonio. In addition to his work on the Finance and Judiciary Committees, Senate Republicans elected him to serve as the Majority Whip for the 114th Congress. Last year, the Senator was very instrumental in securing funding for our new federal courthouse in San Antonio as well, so we thank him for that. We're very fortunate to have such a tremendous senior senator representing our state and representing our city, and we're honored to have him with us today. Please join me in welcoming Majority Whip Senator John Cornyn.
Well, good morning. It's good to see all of you, and got a chance to see the mayor and a significant number of you already talking about the direct flight from San Antonio to DCA, and as I told the mayor and others, I said, if it can be done, it will be done. We're going to give it our very best efforts. I actually told the mayor and Councilman Cryer and others that the last time I had a visit like that from the mayor, we were talking about the courthouse. And I was really worried that expectations were so sky high that it was going to be a spectacular failure on my part if we weren't going to be able to get this done. But thanks to certainly divine intervention and a lot of great work by Senator John Bozeman on the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee for the courthouses and Senator Cochran and others, we were able to work through that issue and basically get all of the federal courthouses down to and including the San Antonio Federal Courthouse funded. So miracles do happen, and we're hoping for a repeat. Now, when it comes to this D.C. flight, which seems to me like it ought to be a little lighter lift than the federal courthouse, but we'll give it our very best efforts. Well, San Antonio is what I still consider home, even though I live in Austin, because, of course, as an Air Force brat, I first came to San Antonio when my dad was stationed at Lackland Air Force Base. And as Tyler said, of course, went to high school at Holmes High School. My dad was transferred to Japan, where I graduated from high school in Japan, but came back and went to Trinity and, of course, St. Mary's, and where I practiced law, where I met my wife, and where I first ran for public office. So, as you can tell, San Antonio is very near and dear to me. Right now, we are engaged in a process of peaceful transition of administration. Sometimes it doesn't seem all that peaceful, but right now we're working primarily in the Senate. As Senator McConnell likes to say, we're in the personnel business here. As the president nominates people to his cabinet, we have the job of advice and consent, and we are slowly, too slowly in my book, but slowly but surely of confirming the president's cabinet picks. I know this is a time of some uncertainty, and given the contentious nature of our election on November the 8th, and a new president who has never served in public office before. But actually, one of the most reassuring things I think I've seen from the new administration is the quality of the people the president has chosen for his cabinet and as vice president. Mike Pence is somebody well known to the Congress. He served 12 years in the House before he became Indiana's governor. And looking at Rex Tillerson, Rick Perry, Jim Mattis, you go down the list, there are really a number of outstanding people who've volunteered to serve our country by serving in the president's cabinet. We're also going to have the important responsibility of filling a vacancy on the United States Supreme Court, which is always fraught with contention. Since the time I've been here in the Senate, we've done 4 of those, and now with Judge Gorsuch, it will be our 5th. We also have some other important work to do on the federal judiciary writ large. Even though I do believe we worked in good faith with the Obama administration, Senator Cruz and Senator Hutchison before him, to try to assist the president in selecting the best and brightest members of the bar for the federal judiciary, it just did not seem to be a huge priority for the Obama administration, and I just am always sort of mystified why that was so. As a result, we have, there's 13 vacancies on the federal courts, 2 at the circuit court and 11 federal district court vacancies in Texas. And we are hard at work doing the preliminary work so we can work together with the White House to recommend people who go through our bipartisan Federal Judicial Evaluation Committee. Before President Obama came into office, this was a partisan committee, and I think that was a big mistake. I do think it's important when you're talking about selecting the best and the brightest people to recommend to the White House for service and for a lifetime tenure on the federal bench. It's important to have a bipartisan process. And so Senator Cruz and I are committed to that. And we are looking forward to working with David Pritchard of San Antonio, who's the chairman of the committee, together with the bipartisan group that is going to help us make recommendations to the president. We're also engaged in a process called the Congressional Review Act of regulations. As I've traveled the state and listened to people around the country, they really feel like the regulatory state has run amok, and that it's been one of the reasons why our economic recovery after the Great Recession of 2008 has been so anemic. And so we are in the process not only of working with the administration to review existing regulations, but also using this Congressional Review Act to repeal, in essence, regulations where it's appropriate. And so we do need to do a lot more work, I think, because the regulatory state has gotten too powerful and is unaccountable by its very nature. Those of us who serve in Congress, of course, you can vote us out of office, but it's impossible to vote the bureaucrat who passes a new rule or regulation out of office. And so that's why it's exceedingly important that on the front end, we make sure that we have a reasonable and common sense approach to regulation. I actually think that's one of the reasons why Texas has continued to prosper even in the wake of a terrible recession in 2008. We've literally been the engine pulling the train of the economy for the country, which leads me to a couple of other issues that I want to conclude on, and forgive me for coming and leaving, but I do have to go vote here in a minute. There's a couple of things that do concern me about what we're hearing from on both trade and taxes that I would just want to allude to briefly. I've talked to Wilbur Ross, who's going to be the new Commerce Secretary, and he's going to be the President's point man on NAFTA. And frankly, the conversation I had with him was somewhat reassuring that they weren't talking about throwing NAFTA out, but rather updating NAFTA. And I think that's a worthwhile exercise, recognizing the important symbiotic economic relationship we have with Mexico and the importance of our relationship with Canada and North America in terms of our trade and our economy. So that's really important, and I want you to know that I'm tracking that very closely because I don't want to do anything that kills the engine that pulls the U.S. economy, and that's our great state of Texas. Similarly, there's been some tax proposals that have caused me some skepticism, something called the border adjustment tax that you've probably followed. And I certainly believe that one of the ways we can help grow the economy is to make our tax code simpler, more rational, and more fair to make the United States more competitive globally rather than see corporations move overseas because they don't want to pay the double taxation associated with the status quo. But the border adjustment tax is a little bit of a leap of faith. If you follow this, it depends on the revaluation of our currency to accommodate this tax paid for imports into the United States. Given the symbiotic relationship we have, particularly with the automobile industry, with the maquiladoras just on the southern and northern, just across the border in Mexico, but the fact that many of those parts are supplied from U.S. parts, this is something I think we need more and better answers to. The whole purpose of the border adjustment tax, and again, I think it's a noble effort to try to simplify our tax code and help grow the economy in the process, but we don't want to make any unintended errors or mistakes. And again, particularly from a Texas standpoint, I just want you to know that I'm monitoring that very closely, trying to ask all the hard questions, trying to make sure we understand exactly how this thing will be implemented and what other alternatives might exist. I'm all for lowering the business tax rates to 20%, the pass-through rates to 25%. That would be wonderful. Lowering and creating 3 individual income tax rates. But when you're talking about dealing with our economy writ large, this is obviously something we want to be very careful about as we go forward. You all are very kind and understanding to know that I have to let me go from that. I would ordinarily stand here and answer or dodge a few questions, but thank you for letting me drop by, and you can count on me and my office's help to be there with you to work on the various projects that you have here in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much.
Senator Cornyn, for your leadership and your deep love of San Antonio, we did want to present you with a token of appreciation. It's San Antonio memorialized in pictures over the last 150 years.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.